when I started to think about how we might save the UK because of 50 years of neglect and the fact that it's fallen away into obscurity and that the people themselves seem to wish upon it its own destruction and how that's come about, I first had to think really about, well, how are we going to save humanity? And of course, as you know, I'm one of those that believes that the only way to save humanity would be for there to be some sort of apocalyptic event, really, or some form of catastrophe, probably nuclear war. And even then, I'm wondering whether or not this retrogressive sub-enlightenment species that we've become are really savable. And it's quite sad to see everybody running around trying to find salvation in a world which they've destroyed themselves, societies they've destroyed themselves. And now increasingly through a kind of virus of delusion. But I want to leave that to one side and go back to my rather innocent idea about how we could reconstruct the UK in a way that can save it from what seems to be an inevitable demise. So I'm going to think of this like a sort of 5 or 6 point plan. There's no point in patching it up anymore. The infrastructure is rotten. The siphoning off of capital to very few is now part of sort of the modern capitalist way. And so there's no money or staying in the communities anymore. And we need to deal with all of that. The tension that's sort of inherent in the United Kingdom. The tension that's inherent in the United Kingdom now is palpable. And it's the same everywhere. And people looking for answers, and they're looking for answers in the wrong way. I mean, the classic example, obviously, in the UK would be rise in popularity of the Reform Party, a bunch of complete idiots who will make the things that are bad now even worse, and it's so clear, just like the same people who demanded and using propaganda to suggest that Brexit would be some form of wonderful new beginnings have been proved completely wrong. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get on with it. Number 1, devolve. To take the heat out, we need to devolve. England is a strange place which has a huge amount of problems. So let's reduce those problems. No more fighting to keep Scotland within the United Kingdom on some form of ancient principle. Scotland has a reasonable population and could easily survive as part of the EU. Let Scotland go. Scotland will be fine. Scotland will join the EU. It will probably adopt the euro and it can get on with its life. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details. I'm not going to start costing things. I'm just going to give you like a basic overview of, I think, what needs to be done. Because I think there is something really rotten in the state of England, and I want to address that. I think that England has been totally corrupted, not by governments actually, just by, a kind of new breed of technological corporatism, and that we've all fallen for it, And also England's a strange place because you've got these little wonderful market towns, where everything's fine, and then not far away you've got absolute deprivation and desolation, in other towns. Towns that are completely falling apart, shuttered windows, shops, just broken dumps, So, anyway, devolve. Goodbye, Scotland. well done, out you go, good luck, you'll be fine. They want to go. Many of them despise the English and they despise the Westminster government. Just get rid of it, release the tension. Can you already feel the tension releasing as Scotland leaves? What are we left with? Ireland is going to become a united Ireland. So let's accelerate that process. Again, another sense of relief. Wales obviously isn't strong enough to be entirely independent, but it can become one of the self-autonomous regions, and that's what should happen. In a self-autonomous region, you devolve nearly all of the power to a regional parliament. And that parliament is democratically elected, or indeed can be chosen from average people on a roll call, people who are on the register. You might have to do 1 year at like jury service. I'll explain why that's important. So what are we left with now? Wales has gone, self-autonomous region. Scotland has gone. Ireland is no longer a problem. We're left with this little rump of England. We've reduced the population by 15 million already. And what have we got? We've got a country that's definitely not at ease with itself. So if you were to arrive from space, little alien, and you were to turn on something as obnoxious as GB News. GB News is 24/7 propaganda and moaning, actually. It's moaning because, of course, they have to fill up the whole time, so they've got nothing really to say. So they have very old white guys, generally, who moan about Starmer 24/7. Just moan and moan and moan. What value is that? Where's the value in that? I mean, I saw the headline they had yesterday. Starmer will be gone by Christmas. Who cares? Even if Starmer goes, someone else goes. They're moaning. They will moan. Okay, they will moan until Nigel Farage is in power, and then they'll stop moaning and they'll just become what they are already, which is this Nigel Farage show. I mean, it's very easy to pick obnoxious people and put them on the telly and start using them for a tool of propaganda. I mean, that's just what they do. And Ofcom is completely lame and impotent. All right. So no more blaming the government for anything. Can you imagine how that will remove the tension? How do you do that? Okay, so what you do is you divide what is left of England into 5 or 6 autonomous regions. And those regions are governed by a local regional authority completely. And that regional authority is managed by the people themselves. Therefore, if you have an issue in one of the regions, then it's the people themselves who must take responsibility for that. Government would really just be a kind of, would oversee the things that government oversee. The collection of taxes, I suppose, and the education system would have to remain kind of universal, with a universal standard, and of course military would have to be run there. But everything else, all those things that really affect your everyday life, and most importantly the flow of money, would remain within the regions. Now, what are we going to call these regions? Well, we could go back to the traditional names. Just a bit of fun, this is, just a bit of fun. Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, Lancastria, East Anglia, London, and the South Realm. Can you imagine these regions? Autonomous, self-governing, run by the people themselves. The people only have themselves to blame. There is no government as such with which they can point their, anger and frustrations. They can be in charge of their own districts. The other thing to do is to take the heat out housing and energy, making people scrabble around on their hands and knees, even, with nurses and people in, even middle income who can't afford, got nothing left at the end of the month. Well, one of the reasons for this is because the three areas that they need to spend money on, transport, energy bills and rent or housing, just sucks up nearly everything they've got. Why? It's very, very easy to take the heat out of housing. The only reason we haven't taken the heat out of housing is because there are a number of people who, for that, wouldn't be of interest for them. They want to own very large, multiple houses. They want to be capitalist and own capital, and they want to rent that capital out to poor people. So I would just suggest that we take the heat out of it. Now, how you take the heat out, there are many, many tools you could do. I mean, you could... There are things with tax and stamp duty, but you could also make a rule that you can't own more than 2 houses. Very simple. And then the autonomous regions could also decide. So in Wessex, which is Cornwall, where they have a terrible housing crisis because local people can't afford to be there because nearly all of the homes are owned by the rich Londoners, they would then be able to take, I think, much more courageous decisions in order to protect their own local housing market, because it would be the people themselves who would be governing that municipality, that region. And I don't think the people themselves would put up with it. At the moment, you often have people who are, unfortunately, linked closely to the sort of the moneyed and people who've got an influence who would prefer it that there aren't too many changes to housing policy. So, housing. The other thing is energy. It's absolutely ridiculous to be paying €300 a month or what have you, which you can be paying now for a family in a small house on gas and electricity. $300 a month. On top of that, you've got your council tax of €100 a month, another €100 a month, minimum, maybe €200 a month. Then you've got water, which is going up. You've got your insurances, you've got your communication. I mean, it's thousands of pounds a month before you even sort of get to the rent if you're in a reasonable kind of 3-bedroom house with a family. So there's absolutely no need for energy companies to make huge amounts of profits. Again, it's up to the new regions, but I suspect that they would think it would be a good idea to reduce the energy bills. In fact, it would be demanded. Energy and water bills could be reduced by removing the profit. Why should the profits of the energy we use end up in the Cayman Islands? Why can't the profits end up in the hands of those regions to ensure good infrastructure? So that's another thing I would do. Nationalise basically energy and water, but nationalise it in an effective way at a regional level so that it can be directed right back into the community. The technology companies at the moment, not only are they kind of like just this unpleasant swamp of noise and propaganda, we would have to make them responsible for their own content, which they're not at the moment. But they're also siphoning off everybody's cash. If you've got any spare cash, the technology companies are siphoning it off in one way or another. I'll give you an example. Let's say you've got a city or a small city, and you found that you've got a problem with Airbnb because the Airbnb app, which is owned by, I think, an American company, they've swamped your city with these empty apartments which are used for short stay. And they take a good percentage of all that cash for this rented out property. Where's that cash going? We don't know. It just disappears. It's gone. It's out of the country. It's finished. It's where. So you end up with the money being sucked out of your communities and a town with a load of empty flats, and when people need housing. Well, the state needs to deal with these companies. At the moment, the government can't do it because the government are in bed with these companies. They are these companies, really. Ministers are on board of directors of these sort of tech companies. Look how they love them. Remember Sunak sitting with Elon Musk a couple of years ago at that conference, talking about, what a wonderful future it was going to be. Even that seems very dated now, doesn't it? Why can't the regional authorities take control of Airbnb technology? And then if you want to rent a room to a holidaymaker, or you want to rent your flat, and you are regulated, and so, it's allowed on the basis that the amount of Airbnb in that region has not got out of control, then the money, the commission that is paid, instead of going again to California or going to some overseas trust, remains within the community because it is operated and controlled by, or certainly under the steering of the region. Is that so much to ask? That you can put the money back into the region? Nothing else. You can make, if you want to, you can build a nice new pier by the water and just enhance the experience of those holidaymakers who are staying in the Airbnb. If you wanted to, you do what you want. It's for the people to decide. So, in a way, I suppose this looks like starting again, really. But there's no point in trying. I mean, surely we've all learnt the lesson that England isn't working as a country. It's not a country at ease with itself. We don't even know whether we should wave the flag or not. But I think you would know if you wanted to. If you were living in Mercia, the new region of Mercia, I think you'd be willing to raise the Mercia flag if the Mercia Parliament was controlled by people just like you, people you'd either voted for or yourself. Maybe you had been chosen for a 1 year's service in the Parliament. I think you'd be happy to raise the Mercian flag, or the Lancastrian flag, or the Northumbrian flag, the East Anglian flag, the South Realm flag. And you could be proud of your region, because it was a self-autonomous region, which was doing the right things. It wasn't impoverishing the population. It was ensuring that the population would benefit from the economic activity in that region. The thing is that this doesn't work unless you have the compliance of the people. At the end, what you have to say is that this is up to you. If you think you can just sort of sit around, and let your property deteriorate and let your garden decay and let your street fall apart, if you can, allow shops to be empty because you won't let them, because you don't want to let them at a rate that's less than that you feel it should be let for, etc. If you don't want to be part of this process, if when your name is chosen to serve as a regional parliamentary member for 1 year, you tear up the envelope, you can't be bothered, well then there's no hope, is there? There's no hope for you. Who are you going to blame then? You're not going to blame Starmer if you've actually ripped up your own envelope, are you? Because you can't be bothered to get out of bed. I mean, at least Starmer, gets out of bed in the morning and does something. They don't mention that on GB News. So are you prepared to get out of bed and do something? Because, if you want things to work, if you want things to be as they are in your own vision as to what a good society is, then you need to do something. You can't rely on other people. And it'll be interesting to see, when there's no government to blame, only yourselves, whether or not you'll kind of live up to the task that you've been given.